Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Facebook Live event this evening. My name is McKaylee Steen. I am the AISES Junior National Student Representative. I'm a first-year PhD student at UC Berkeley in the Environmental Science, Policy, and Management Department. And I'm a longtime member of AISES, been involved since the science fair in middle school. And so I'm really excited to be here with you all tonight and really thankful for our panelists that are here. Before we really get going, I'm going to start with some announcements from AISES, things to keep in mind. So the first thing that I want to remind folks of is that AISES internship applications are now open and they're due January 31st. And then AISES scholarships open on January 31st. So be sure to fill those out. And in order to fill those out, you need an AISES membership. But the cool thing about that is that the AISES membership is free for pre-college and college students, which is awesome. So please take advantage of that. Get your AISES membership if you don't have one already. And speaking of which, AISES members, we need you all to vote on proposed resolutions by January 5th. And then also keep a lookout for the AISES Energy Workforce Development. There is a $3,000 scholarship associated with this, and they're now accepting applications. The next AISES Facebook Live will be on January 6th, so mark your calendars at 6 p.m. and will feature the AISES Energy Challenge. So come learn about how your middle school and high school students can find an energy solution for their community. It's a really great way to get involved in STEM. And all of these opportunities are on the AISES website. And so if you have any questions or want to check on any of these deadlines that I mentioned, all of the info is on the AISES website. It's a great resource to put in your favorites tab on your computer. So now, as we dive into our evening, I'm going to start by introducing our panelists that are here with us today. And I will start with Amber Finley, who comes from the three affiliated tribes, Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara Nations. She is the Director of Research and Development and Science Faculty at the Nuepta Hidatsa Sanish College. My apologies if I mispronounced any of that. Amber graduated from Fort Berthold Community College in 2001 with 2 associate degrees, one in science and the other in liberal arts. Amber then transferred to the University of North Dakota and graduated in 2006 with a bachelor's in science and fisheries and wildlife biology. Amber went on to earn her master's of science in environmental management in 2008 from the University of San Francisco. Amber currently serves as the AISES Board Secretary and is an AISES Sequoia Fellow. Thanks, Amber, for being here this evening. Tonight, we also have Christina Helona, who's originally from Sawmill, Arizona, on the Navajo Reservation. She is of the Black Streak Wood People clan, born for the Folded Arms People clan. The Bitter Water clan is her maternal grandfather's clan, and the Salt clan is her paternal grandfather's clan. She received a BSE degree in aerospace engineering from Arizona State University and an MSE degree in engineering management from George Washington University. She has been an AISES member since middle school when she competed in the AISES science fairs, which led to AISES scholarships, internships, and leadership opportunities, like serving as the AISES National Student Representative. She's currently a member of the AISES board and is an AISES Sequoia Fellow. So definitely get involved with the AISES Science Fair or the Energy Challenge. You never know where it might lead you. And then finally, we have Dr. Grace Boltel, who is from the Crow tribe. And Grace currently serves as the AISES board treasurer. She received a Bachelor of Science in Civil and Environmental Engineering from Stanford University. She completed her master's degree program at Montana Tech and Columbia University. Grace completed a doctoral program in the Department of Biological and Environmental Engineering in the College of Agricultural and Life Sciences at Cornell University. Grace is an assistant professor in the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies, affiliated appointment in the Department of Biological Systems Engineering and at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She has participated in AISES programming for the past 22 years and is an AISES Sequoia member. thank you all so much for being here this evening. Reading off those bios, that's such an awesome group of women that we have gathered here tonight. So thank you for taking the time out of your schedules to be here. And although those bios, I think were probably pretty in depth, I want to give you all an opportunity to introduce yourselves, if there's anything that was missed in that, and also maybe give us an idea of a little bit more about your path, like how you found STEM, why STEM, why did you stay in STEM? So we all know that you are in STEM and have been successful in your careers. So kind of what helped you get there and what helped you stay there. And maybe we can start off with Amber.
Uh, Thank you, McKaylee. That was a great introduction for all of us. Um, I think I share a very similar path that Christina does through to AISES. I did not join in middle school, but in high school, I participated in the AISES Science Fair, and then moved on to become a national student rep, and then eventually got to serve on the board. And so now me and Christina serve on the board together. So my path to STEM has been, um, I think, sort of always there. So as a child, I was really good at math. Just came really natural, and so my teachers sort of always just sort of pushed me towards that path. And then I got really interested in biological sciences. I like studying life, and I like learning more about it. And for me, I grew up in California, so I had the ocean right next to me. And so I originally thought when I was younger I was going to be a marine biologist. I was kind of dead set. And then um, the movie The Abyss came out, and then I got really scared of the ocean. And I just didn't feel like I wanted to take the chances of living under the water to study these magnificent animals. So then my gears sort of shifted, and I started thinking, well, maybe I want to be a veterinarian, because at the time that's the only like traditional path I could think of. And that's kind of one of the things about kind of coming into STEM, is like not knowing that there was other opportunities in science. There was all kinds of different sciences. You just sort of kind of get stuck in thinking about traditional roles. And then it wasn't until I got to college that I actually started thinking about, like, what do I really want to do? And so I have, like I said, always kind of had this affinity for wanting to learn more about wildlife. And so when I got to the University of North Dakota, I had aspirations of wanting to go to vet school, but then I ended up majoring in fisheries and wildlife biology. And that sort of took me on a totally different path, because um, it started me being interested more in ecological sciences. And so I just sort of made that transition to wanting to be outdoors, wanting to participate in learning about ecosystems. And so that sort of made my path change yet again. And then, and then I went into environmental management. And so I thought, when I got that degree, I was like, okay, maybe I'm gonna use that degree and go home and try to help, because at the time it was just starting to pick up with oil activity here on the Fort Berthold Reservation. And so I kind of thought like that was where I was going to be. And then um, I ended up getting called to come back to the college and help teach. And we have an environmental science program, a 2-year and a 4-year degree. And so, and we have a shortage of instructors. I mean, there's not a whole lot of um, people who want to work on the reservation and then work in a tribal community college, and then also have the necessary degrees to be able to teach at the college level. And so I think it just sort of became like this calling to want to provide that perspective to students. So being, not only being a STEM major, but then also being a female and being from the tribe, being able to be sort of, I don't want to call myself a role model, but I just wanted to be somebody that they could identify with, right? So somebody that um, because for me that was one of the things that kind of kept me going in this direction, was finding mentors that looked like me, had thoughts like me, had grown up in very similar situations that I had. And so that kind of always helped me stay on that path, because there were lots of times where I was like, I don't think I still want to do this. Some of the classes were extremely hard. Some of the classes, make you want to cry sometimes. And then, somebody keeps sort of pushing you along. And for me, that was a lot of mentorship that I got, not just through AISES, but other organizations that AISES sort of opened me up to. So I'm going to take a break and let my other fellow panelists talk a little bit about themselves now, because I'm not used to talking about myself so much.
That's great. Thank you. Christina or Grace, whoever wants to go next.
Yeah, I guess I'll go sort of going up in the order that I see myself in. Let's see. So I have very similar paths as Amber has already kind of said. And you, McKaylee, as well. We all did the science fair, so that's how we got how we got involved with AISES. And then my story as far as how I became kind of like an aerospace engineer, or how I even wanted to even pursue that. Actually, I've told the story many times, and the audience, I apologize if you heard this before, but I always knew I wanted to do something having to do with flight, aerospace, anything that flew, space. Since I was like 5 or 6 years old. I remember my very first memory of seeing actually an airplane when I was little, up on the Navajo reservation, and just seeing the airplane, I just was obsessed. And I would drag my mom to our local library, and I would, check out all the books I can about airplanes or space and astronauts and things that flew. So I just always knew that that's what I wanted to do, which is very rare. I'm not saying anyone in the audience, you have to know what you're going to do right away. As Amber has said, she changed her mind at certain times, and that's okay. And that's completely normal. I think mine is more abnormal than anything. But I just knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to make things fly. And so I was just always really into that. And so even my science fairs and everything always had to do with something with airplanes or space related, aerospace in general. So I just kind of always knew I wanted to do that. And even when I was in school, when things got hard, like Amber was saying, there's lots of courses that you come across and you're just like, why can I get this? Or why is it so difficult for me? I think we've all kind of faced that at some point in our college degrees, um, our past college life, I want to say. But it's just, I always went back to that memory of being a little girl. I was like, I knew I wanted to do this. So that's just kind of how I came about wanting to do what I am doing now. And I just realized I didn't have that in my write-up for my introduction of like what I do and what I'm doing now. So I'm a program manager at Northrop Grumman in Chandler, Arizona, which is just a suburb of the Phoenix area. And I work on the Antares program. And if anyone's ever heard of Antares, Antares is a rocket that supplies the resupply rocket that takes payload to the International Space Station, and our customer is NASA. So we do this quite a few times a year. So that's some pretty cool stuff right there. So I really enjoy doing that, and have been doing that for a while now. So I won't take too much more time because I want like Grace to have her give her story too. But that's just kind of a little bit of how I became where I am now and what I'm doing at this point in time.
Yeah. So I first became involved with AISES when AISES offered summer programs, and that was, I believe it was after like 7th or 8th grade. There was a summer program in North Carolina that was run by Frida Porter at the time. And I think that campus is now UNC Pembroke. So I was very young. I think it was the first time I ever rode on an airplane when I went to that camp. And I didn't know what engineering was. I really don't know how I found out about the program, because that was like way back, like before the days of the internet. I think like maybe one of my school teachers got a flyer or something back in those days. But yeah, ever since then, I knew I wanted to be involved in math and science. That was always something I was drawn to. Um, I went to a boarding school on the East Coast since I was in ninth grade. And I mentioned that because I feel that that's what really prepared me to be able um, to do college level like calculus and all the math and all the science that we need to take to get an engineering degree, and that was really tough. You know, I think that I struggled a lot with time management and you know, being involved in all the activities as an undergrad, but I was really determined to get my engineering degree. Um, yeah, and luckily we had a really active AISES chapter, so we were able to attend conferences together. I was also a student athlete and involved with the powwow, and really just doing way too much stuff as an undergrad. But after that, I really was burnt out from schoolwork, and I got an engineering degree because you know, I could also start working right away. So that's what I did, and after a couple of years, I got really restless working as an engineer, because when you're junior, you don't really get that many interesting projects. So I really started thinking about going back to graduate school. And luckily, I just happened to enroll at the University of Montana, Montana Tech, and they offered the Sloan Scholarship Program, which fully funds master's and doctoral degrees. So I was able to complete my degree there, and then go on to a doctoral program, a master's and doctoral program full time. And in between there, I also knew I didn't want to return to industry to work as an engineer. So I took a job at a tribal college in Bismarck, it's United Tribes Technical College, and I was an engineering instructor there. And I really realized that I needed to have an advanced degree to build a program, to build a program that I would want to, and to be able to bring in funding. So I went back and finished my doctoral degree eventually at Cornell University. And all throughout that time, ever since undergrad, I haven't really been involved with an AISES chapter. They're not that you don't really see them that much. The schools I went to, I think maybe the undergraduate students have started one. So I really missed that. And it was just in the last couple of years when I was doing my postdoc at Stanford that we were able to start a professional chapter in Northern California. And it was some professionals and graduate students. So, you know, I think that was really necessary, because there were really few Indigenous graduate students and postdocs. But you know, there's such a need for programs and that support us at that level. And since I've since moved away and in faculty now, and luckily we do have a chapter here, and there are other science faculty that are able to advise them. So yeah, so I think I'm in a unique situation where there are other Native and Indigenous STEM faculty, science and math, at my university. So yeah, that's kind of a long version of my story.
Great. Thank you all so much for sharing some additional info about yourselves. And it's really useful to hear how you got to where you are, because I feel like it shows us that there's not just one path that can get us to where we might want to go. And something that you all mentioned as you were talking about your stories, you all mentioned some challenges, whether that was a class or, maybe there were a couple other things going on, but I'm curious what challenges you faced as you were on your journey to get where you are now, and what challenges are maybe persistent or continue even once you are established in your career and that sort of thing. And additionally, if you want to, how do you overcome those challenges? How do you face them and continue on your path? And that's for anyone. So whoever wants to tackle that.
Christina, you want to go first this time? We'll switch it up.
Sure, yeah. Sorry, my cat over here is being crazy. So to challenges that I faced, I think which is hard, is probably being away from family, getting homesick and losing loved ones. When I was an undergrad, I lost one of my grandmothers, so that was really hard. Just trying to stay focused too, it's like not only are you away from your family, but you lose the loved one, and I lost her during finals, which is like the worst time too. And it's just like, how do I stay on this path and, just try to, I know that she would want me to continue to do well, but it's just like your thoughts are just all over the place. So, that's one challenge I face. And I know a lot of you out there are facing that now, especially with, the pandemic and COVID-19 as well. Another one I faced is I actually got really sick when I was an undergrad. So much so that my grades one semester were just awful. I was in the hospital for like 3 weeks, and I was sick, very sick, heavily, months. So the semester started, I think, the end of August, and then I was in the hospital most of September, and then I missed a lot of classes, and so that was really hard. Trying to overcome, missing classes and trying to have friends to pick up homework and trying to work with your professors and hoping they're understanding of what's going on in your life. So those are, that was really horrible. And I'm not sure if anybody else faced it too, but I've actually faced kind of like discrimination too, like as being an engineer in my courses. And when I was an undergrad at ASU, there was a couple of classes that I was probably like my junior year. And at that point in time, one of my classes, I was the only girl in the class out of probably like 22, maybe. I was like the only female. And then probably out of the whole class, there's only 5 of us that were probably minorities in that particular class. But I just faced, like, it was hard. Like, if you missed a class, like, I remember some of my classmates, the guys would be like, oh yeah, the professor said, like, oh, where's the girl today? She missed a class, like, things like that. Or, if you don't do well, he made comments like, females shouldn't be engineers and just like stuff like that. And it's just like really takes a toll on your mental well-being. But, I was very lucky that I had a good network at my school. Was very involved with the minority engineering program at the time, and was able to bring. I didn't want to like say anything, but it got to a point where I needed to talk to somebody, and then it got elevated, and and the professor was put on leave and all that too. But just finding your voice too is like, do I want to bring up something that is so negative, and having to deal with things like that too. So I think I had way too many examples. But just overcoming all those different hardships is hard. And you're all going to face those at some point in time. Not my same examples, but some kind of difficulty in your studies that's going to derail you a little bit. But you just got to find it in you to kind of stay on track. And it's okay if you don't get that A or even that B, just because of something you're going through. It's okay to not get the best grade all the time, even though we all want to. Uh, and also some of our scholarships, require us to get A's and B's and stuff like that too. So I understand wanting to do that, but sometimes if it's just like an exam or a quiz or something like that, it's okay to not get the best grade just for your mental well-being. So I think I talked enough, so I'll let Amber and Grace give their examples and challenges they face.
So I think maybe so I can relate, Christina, because I know during my undergrad, and I think undergrad kind of hits you a little bit harder because you're new and you don't, some of the challenges that you face are the first time you're facing them alone, like without your family. And so it can be really alienating sometimes, and it can be hard to explain. I think with Native students in particular, we see this where because we have a different relational system and how we relate to like our mother's sisters and our grandmother's sisters, they're considered grandmothers and grandfathers to us. And so I remember one time in particular, I had it wasn't me personally, but it was a friend of mine who one semester, I think she had 3 of her grandmas pass away during that semester. And I remember her coming in crying at the Indian Center at UND, and when everybody was kind of like, what's going on? And her her professor, one of her professors, kind of try to kind of call her a liar and be like, how many grandmas do you have? You're supposed to only have 2 grandmas, right? And they just had this cultural misunderstanding, but that ended up being a really big challenge for her. And that happens to a lot of our students when they go to more mainstream institutions where people just aren't familiar with your culture and don't understand, and they make ignorant comments like that. And similar to Christina, at the time when I was taking fisheries and wildlife biology, it was pretty male dominated, mostly because a lot of the guys who majored in that, their focus was to then become like a wildlife ranger afterwards. And so that particular profession requires you to be sort of selfish, right? You are going to give up a lot of your time. You're going to dedicate a lot of time to being outdoors and going and doing research. And so for me, I was a young mother. And when I got to UND, I had my daughter was 2.5. And so I had the additional challenge of figuring out scheduling my class schedules, still trying to get all the required classes, but trying to make them fit around when I would be able to have daycare available to me. And then when we would have to go do field work, sometimes that didn't fall within that nice little timeline. And so, I would have to either take my child somewhere either really early in the morning or ask a friend to make sure she got to school so then I could attend my field biology classes. And then sometimes she had to come with me. And sometimes I could tell some students were kind of annoyed by that because most people didn't bring their kid to class with them, but it was the way it was. And I just sort of always I remember one time meeting somebody, and it was at an AISES event, and she was an older lady. What's her last name? Her name is Janine Pease Pretty on Top. So she was the president of, I think, Little Bighorn College at the time. And I remember seeing her go up on the stage, and she had her her daughter with her. And she was like, I'm not gonna apologize. This is the way it is. I'm a female. I have kids, and and they're gonna participate with me. And I think she sort of said this to me because after that I was like, okay, I'm not gonna apologize for having a child with me. Like, this is who I am. I have a kid, deal with it. And so most of my colleagues were fine with that. I would only get maybe once in a while a professor who was a little bit not accommodating, but for the most part, most of them did. When I did my master's, I had absolutely no problem. All of my fellow students were either parents or working, and so they couldn't just dedicate a whole lot of time to just schooling. And so I think when you get to your master's degree, it's a little bit easier to have a family and stuff. It's not in the sense that you can get schoolwork done and have kids, but I mean, just it tends to be a little bit more accommodating than when you're an undergrad. Um, and I think one other challenge is finding people who are sort of into the same thing you are on your campus. So like I was a little bit of an oddball. I was the only Native student that I knew of that was in fisheries and wildlife biology. I was the only female student in a lot of my classes. And so when I would hang out with other Native students, sometimes they would be like, well, what are you majoring in? And they didn't quite know. And then they would ask me, well, why are you going into that? And so that was another, it's not necessarily a challenge. It was just one of those things where like you kind of feel a little bit alone. Even though you're around other natives on campus, you can still feel alone just because you don't really have anybody to be like, hey, are you taking this class? Like, you know, I didn't have those close friends that were also taking, like, if you're a Native studies student, right? A lot of natives come to campus and they were Native studies or they were business or they were something else where they could like relate to each other. And a lot of times I just didn't have that. And I think for a lot of natives that go into STEM fields, unless their college is known for recruiting natives to that particular field, they don't really have that support. And so they kind of have to seek it out. And I think that's what AISES did for me, was to give me other people that I could relate to that were just like me, that were going through a lot of the same struggles. And so that sort of was one of the reasons why I continued to participate in AISES for so long.
Well, I can think of two main challenges. One that I see now that I'm older, now that I'm faculty, and that I noticed more in my several years in graduate school. Just being a first generation student is just such a challenge. And I think that you know, not having really your family kind of understand. I mean, I think a lot of people in my family had went to college. My parents met in college, but then, you know, they had all of us and didn't quite finish their 4-year degrees. But just having that, you know, that experience or that, you know, that knowledge from your family or seeing other people that went through it, I think that's really a challenge I see for a lot of students, and I'm always really cognizant of that. And you know, that extends to all the other degrees that you know, that we go on and do, and you know, being the first in your family to be in a doctoral program, you know, that's a whole other thing. I really did have just a huge challenge in finding the right degree program and advisor, you know, project, mainly because, you know, really in all of my programs, I didn't really have a advisor that knew anything about tribal communities. In fact, it wasn't until I was at Cornell that I had an advisor who was actually, you know, grew up in the country. So, you know, there's a lot of history that we have to teach our advisors and the people that are supervising us. and that's really something that I am also aware of and try to support students, particularly graduate students that that I work with now. So many of them want to do a research project based in their tribal community, and there's this, this constant process of having to justify why they want to do that. It's not going to be too hard, or it's really just having to prove that there is a project that can be done. It's not like no man's land just because your committee doesn't know anything about it. There are a couple of steps that will have to be done to make sure it's appropriate. So I see that a lot. It wasn't really until I found the right committee members. There just happened to be someone that is an expert in environmental law and federal Indian policy that came onto my committee, and kind of like really validated my project to my main advisors. So that was a huge struggle for me. And that really informs the support I want to provide in the future, and just really kind of just always reinforcing that Indigenous scholarship, Indigenous science, like it's an actual field, it's developing, but also it's worthwhile, and it's really necessary to supporting future scholars in our area.
Great, thank you so much. And that's a really great segue to the next question that I have for all of you. And that is, how can we advance Native women in STEM? So you all talked about some of the barriers that you faced, whether it was overcoming like this systemic, the systemic barriers within higher education or family, or balancing all of the things that you have to balance as a student and as a professional. So how do we encourage Native women to pursue STEM and to stick with it? And you all have talked a lot about AISES and how much AISES has impacted your journey. And so is it lifting up programs like AISES or finding that community? How do we do that?
So I think we've kind of all alluded to that a bit. And Grace really kind of hit the nail on the head here with finding people on your campus that you can identify with and that are going to support you the way that you need to be supported. And I think one of the things is to be your own best advocate. Sometimes we sort of think that, especially as an undergrad, we sort of think we just have to follow this path and we just accept whatever comes our way, right? And so, whatever advisor you end up with, that's the advisor you're stuck with. And what I would suggest is if your advisor doesn't work with you or helps you sort of move along in the path that you want to go on, then find a new advisor. Find somebody who is going to do that for you. You don't have to stick with these guys. And we're starting to see, a lot of the older advisors, our older faculty are starting to retire now. And so we're starting to see a lot more younger faculty and advisors that are able to actually connect better with their students. I think some of them are getting a lot better training now compared to maybe when we were in school and we kind of had the, the old boys club, right? You get chummy with the right guys and then they open up opportunities for you. And that's sort of the thing that like AISES does. For me, it was the Ecological Society of America. They had a program called the SEEDS program, and they actually had a mentoring program where they matched you up with people who shared your interest, or they had degrees that were similar to what you were planning to pursue. And they also would match you up with, people who were doing the kind of research that you wanted to do. And so there are programs out there. I think SACNAS is another great organization, the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Native Americans in Science. They all share something in common. They all find ways to mentor students. And I think that's one way as a student is you need to find what type of organization is going to support you, because that's where you network. That's where you get your mentorship that is going to support you to move on to that next level and to open up those doors, because that's really what it's about, right? You have to make these personal connections with people who have access to what you're trying to do. And that's really what it comes down to, is not always necessarily like because you're a bright student and because you got good grades that's going to automatically get you a job. It's this other personal part where you have to go out and make those connections with people, and you have to kind of, for some people this is really hard because um you know, scientists in general tend to be kind of introverted, right? We like doing our stuff by ourselves and sort of just depend on our merit to take us along. And that's kind of not the way that it works. In reality, it's who you get chummy with, it's who you make connections with that will then open up other connections and create new networks for yourself. And that's what it starts coming down to, is then you need to sell yourself, right? And not be a sellout, but just be somebody who can say like, these are the qualities that I bring and this is why it's important that I be part of your team. So those are some of my suggestions, and I'm sure the other gals have some good ones too.
I'm going to kind of piggyback a little bit after of what Amber kind of already said. I'm a big fan of finding like mentors, someone who's in a similar field as you, or someone who like not just believes in what you can do, but also somebody who's kind of, I want to say like a cheerleader, but somebody who kind of always checks in. Like, it doesn't have to be all the time. It can be like even like somebody who just checks on you a couple times a year and just be like, hey, are you on the path that we talked about? Could it be like a good friend or somebody you've met at any point in your life? When I was in undergrad and studying aerospace, I at the same time was a national student rep, and I was just lucky that I got to meet John Harrington, who was on the board at the time. The first time I got to be on the board with him twice as a professional, as an undergrad. But not saying that you all have to go find an astronaut to be your mentor or anything like that. But I just kind of it was because of AISES that I got that connection, and we just kind of hit it off. And he didn't officially become a mentor. We just became really good friends, but he was just somebody who always was asking how I was doing, and I shared struggles or what he even like helped me with some of my homework a little bit too. So it was nice to have someone on the board when I was an undergrad. But even now, like from time to time, I see him and we keep in touch, but he's just like always like, what are you doing now? What's the next step? What are you gonna do? Like, it's just good to have that person who's just kind of always checking on you. And like Amber said, take advantage of like all the opportunities that she mentioned, SACNAS and AISES, of course. But I mean, there's other organizations. There's even sister organizations that I was an undergrad that I was involved with SHIP and SWE and NSBE, our sister organizations. And I still have a lot of friends and professional contacts and networks that I've really made lifelong friends with that are part of those organizations. And even back when I was an undergrad and looking for a job, and they were definitely helped me get like interviews and just could have contacts like that. But as far as getting women to STEM, I think it also comes back to all of us and going back into our communities and making sure we talk to students, the girls that look like us and are on our reservations and our communities, and encourage them that look at us, we did it. We got somebody who's a postdoc, we got Amber, we got myself. We can do this, and look at us, we're doing it, we're having a great time, and we love what we do. And you should do it too if you like math and science. And you can now I always tell all the girls, now it's your turn. You guys are, I'm too old now, but like you guys can go to Mars, and I won't be able to go to Mars because I'm too old, but you guys could do it. I always tell I'll tell Amber's little ones too, like, every time I see them, I was like, all right, who's the next astronaut? But I'll let Grace, talk about it as well.
Yeah, I just want to mention that I have people approach me to speak to their sons about engineering, and I'm always like, why don't you ask me to speak to your daughters? Well, this relative in particular only has sons, but I mean, I think that that women are just so underrepresented in these positions, especially in tribal communities. I unfortunately, I see this way too often, that women get passed over for things they're qualified for, especially in tribal communities. So I think that that's something that we need to work on. In my own work that I'm doing now, I'm really big on capacity building, and also looking at capacity building with equity. So, how do we build our workforce, our technical workforces, to have better authority over our resources, but in also doing that, how do we be inclusive? How do we encourage STEM workforce to also be inclusive of women, and just inclusive of the community. So that's something that that I think we need to work on, and we can. Most of the Native students going to college are women, and are very qualified to be in these roles, especially technical workforce roles that are very much needed in tribal communities.
Great. So I'm curious, and maybe Grace, you can tackle this one to start. But I'm curious how women in STEM, and Native women in STEM, has changed in the past 5 years, and what do you predict will happen in the next 5 to 10 years, or what do you hope will happen in the next 5 to 10 years with Native women in STEM?
Yeah, well, one thing. So in the last 5 years, I've been in graduate school and postdoc. One thing I have seen, thankfully, is that there are more women becoming faculty, becoming STEM faculty, and that's really needed. Every time I see that one of my colleagues that I've known through AISES mainly, is becoming faculty, it's just that's just so encouraging. But in doing that, there really is a need to support the advanced graduate students, the postdocs. I've said this too, brought this up to AISES in particular many times, because that's the end of this pipeline from student to faculty, and especially in the STEM fields, we have to do that postdoc. It's very rare that you just go right to faculty, and there really isn't much support, programming, funding, but yet it's still I have seen that increase with STEM faculty, and Wendy, who is also an assistant professor, just joined our board. So it's really encouraging to see that in AISES leadership. I would like to see women in all STEM fields just continue to get through those graduate programs. There's only, I just did a presentation on this, there's like 100 PhDs every year, and of that maybe like 40 or 30% are STEM, so 30 to 40 students are getting STEM PhDs. So just increasing those numbers. And I think that having role models is really a huge part of that.
I'll go off of what just Grace had said about what she just ended with about role models. I think in the past 5 years, there's been a lot more women in STEM that look like us. I feel like when I was an undergrad, I had to like look and search for someone who looked like me or who was studying something that I was it not just aerospace, but just any kind of engineering in general. And I feel like, AISES has definitely helped Indigenous women in STEM and, encourage them to pursue this degree and complete it. So I feel like now that we're older, not aging any of us ladies, but now that we're older now, we're the role models for the students now. And I feel like there's more of us now than there was when I was, at least I feel like when there was an undergrad. And not that I was an undergrad 5 years ago, because your question was what happened in the past 5 years, but it's just, I'm just so happy that there's a lot of us, and it makes me happy when I go to these AISES national conferences or even leadership, and even our regional conferences, just to see how many women engineers there are, or just women in STEM. And it just makes my heart happy how many there is more of us. I'm happy that there's more, but I feel like we can do a lot more. And I feel like in the next, 5-10 years, I hope we double or triple that, and continue to do what we're doing. But I hope always pick on Amber and her girls, but I hope they pursue STEM too. No pressure, Amber.
So I think I was reading an article of maybe a few days ago, and it was an article on Mary Ross, who the two engineers here probably know better than I do who she is and what she represents, but she's the first Native American engineer, or first Native American woman engineer. And so she sort of did exactly what we've been talking about. She made it an effort to reach back and help pull other women up with her. And she did things like establishing scholarship funds in her name, specifically to get more Native women into STEM degrees. And there was a really interesting little tidbit in there about Native women with STEM degrees represent only 0.1% of like all people who hold STEM degrees, which makes us extreme oddballs, right? But at the same time makes you think, like, how can we get that number up? And I think we've seen in the last 5 years more women definitely going into STEM fields. I think more so we see a lot more entering in the engineering field, which is awesome. We do see some of the more physical sciences and the hard sciences picking up too, especially biological sciences, and a lot of people going pre-med and getting more female doctors. One area that I know we've talked about, at least with the AISES board, and Sarah always brings this up to us, is that the tech industry is really lacking as far as female representation goes. So we're kind of doing really well in a lot of the other areas, but in the tech industry, we're still way behind. And I was just kind of thinking about, like, so how do you get girls to really be interested in that? And you think about all of these new apps, right, that everybody sort of, especially young kids, really are attracted to, things like Snapchat and TikTok and God knows what other apps are out there, but YouTube, they enjoy interacting with these apps. And I think maybe that might be where that next step goes, is as we think of projects to do with AISES, we start looking at how to get girls into coding and getting girls into wanting to pursue the other side of that, not just making the videos and being cute and and wanting to share like all the gossip and whatnot with each other, but kind of going on the other side of that and saying, like, well, how do I create an app? How do I create an app that does the things that I want it to do? and sort of sparking that interest, and then, and of course, elevating that interest and getting them to pursue degrees in the tech industry, because I think that's definitely up and rising, and we're going to continue to see that. From the environmental side, we have sustainable technologies and renewable technologies that I would really love to see a lot more females get into that industry as well. We just launched our 2-year sustainable technologies degree program at Nueta Hirata Satanish College, and that's for us, we're the only tribal college that offers that type of degree, and so I'd like to see a lot more of our female students kind of going that way, because people sort of think tech degrees mean that you have to have a lot of math, but it's not actually. It's more about learning this other language, right? And learning how to speak computer language, and that kind of goes sort of towards a different part of your brain, that's not maybe so much like how we grew up, where we were like, you need to be smart in math and science in order to be able to pursue a STEM degree. I think technology really offers an opportunity for people who may not be so strong in those areas to really start going into the STEM fields, and who knows what that would lead to, but at least I think that might be where we're headed in the next few years here.
It's very exciting that all of your responses give me a lot of hope moving forward, and I'm just so thankful for this conversation and being able to be a part of it. And I just want to mention really quickly that for folks watching on Facebook Live at the moment, feel free to drop comments. If you have your own questions, feel free to post them, and we'll try and get to them as we continue to move through our conversation here. But switching gears, maybe just a little bit, I wanted to ask, and you've kind of hinted at it a little bit, but Christina, this question's for you. I was wondering, how did you get into the aerospace industry, and why did you stay? You've told us some really exciting things about people that you've met along the way, but we would love to hear a little bit more about that.
All right, sure. So I again was obsessed. If you guys heard me earlier, I was obsessed with airplanes and space when I was younger. When I was outside playing, I remember seeing the airplane for the very first time. That memory was with me forever. But as far as continuing on, my path is just when I was an undergrad, I was a NASA intern, space grant intern. And actually, as part of my studies with my engineering aerospace program at ASU, I was also interning and got to build a satellite that actually went up on one of the space shuttles that ASU was a part of in collaboration with 2 other universities. It was the University of Colorado and New Mexico State. So, getting to actually work on a satellite and build something with your own hands was also pretty cool. And again, another unique opportunity that came to me, just happened to happen based on my program in undergrad. So having to do that was pretty cool and fun. And then the second thing was my senior project, as we developed an antenna pulley type contraption to use in space, and had to release a certain portion of our satellite that I was talking about earlier. So we got to test that on the Vomit Comet at NASA. And I don't believe they do that program anymore, but it's basically this KC-135 airplane that goes up 45 degrees and down 45 degrees. So it's when you're coming down, you hit about 0 gravity. And so you got so many, I think it was about 60 seconds of 0 gravity. So it's during that point in time that you got to test certain things. And hopefully if the person was moving around during that time, you don't mind like a couple of G's hitting you. Quite a few people got sick though, but I was luckily I didn't have any motion sickness or anything like that. But yeah, so that was an amazing experience too, was being selected by NASA to use our senior project and test that out at NASA as well. And then, you know, when it came to like looking for a job and wanting to figure out what I wanted to do, at that point in time, I was just kind of obsessed with like satellites. So I took a position with a company in the Phoenix area. It was a startup, and I got to do, again, when I was working for that company, I got to ride the Vomit Comet again. Of course, the company had to pay money to do the projects and testing on that again too. But, you know, just having that experience and able to do that again, it was just fun. I'm just really lucky that, you know, I got to do these fun projects that kept me excited about what I was doing. I wasn't just stuck behind a desk or a computer. And I was also kind of one of those weird engineers that actually likes to talk and work with people. It's funny because I felt like I was an introvert all the way up until I became involved with AISES. I feel like AISES made me come out of my shell a little bit because I was actually pretty quiet and shy. And a lot of people don't remember that or tease me about that. Amber probably remembers because we're like undergrad students at the same time. But yeah, I'm just really lucky I got to be part of all these different projects. And, you know, you make sure you find something that you enjoy. That's the takeaway here, is like, make sure you really enjoy it and you like it, and you're excited about doing it every day. I mean, you know, going to work every day is hard sometimes, especially when Mondays come around. But, you know, if you like what I'm doing, like I get excited, like, okay, my next big thing here at work is we have an Antares launch in mid-February. So that's happening again. So, and probably a lot of you if you ever keep track of what I'm doing, you're like, you just had one a month ago. But yeah, so it's like, you know, I'm excited about it. And there's lots of work that has to be done before then and now. But, you know, just make sure you're passionate about what you're doing and you like doing it every day. So, and, you know, that's kind of my takeaway of how I came into the aerospace field and why I stay, is because I love it. I love it a lot.
Yeah, and kind of going off of that, how do you maintain excitement? You know, as you mentioned, like Monday rolls around or you're in the nitty gritty of a project. How do you maintain excitement throughout all of your projects or throughout your career, or maybe for any undergrads that are watching, like how do you keep being excited about this really long, difficult path that's in front of you? And Christina, if you want to kick us off, and then Grace and Amber, if you have any input there as well, feel free to jump in.
Sure, yeah. I think what keeps me motivated is like, there's nothing like, for me, my job, there's nothing like being in the control room and hearing like all this stuff is nominal once it launches, but also like if I'm at the launch site and I'm in a control room, there's nothing like being shaken. Like you can feel the rocket and you can hear it, and it's just like you're sitting there trying to keep track of everything that's going on in your computers, and you're like trying to concentrate, but there's nothing like feeling that rocket just like go off near you. And then if you're a spectator, or if I'm not at the launch site and I'm still looking at stuff for like data, but I can see the rocket launch and everything's successful and is going well, there's nothing like that feeling of success. And it's just like, it's like the best feeling. Or like seeing a launch never gets old, but it's just like, you just kind of look forward to that moment when the stuff starts to get hard. You're like, okay, what's the end goal? What's you know, what's the end project, or what it is. And for me, it's our launch, you know, successful launch. And I think about that when I'm like, I don't want to go to that meeting, or I don't want to finish this. I don't want to really do that. And it's just like, you know, okay, the end goal is here is a successful launch and it's going to be awesome. And like it always is, but between now and then I got to do X, Y, and Z. So at least that's for me and how I keep motivated. I just think of the end goal and what the result is going to be.
Any other input on how you stay excited about the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I could add, so I'm a new assistant professor, relatively new, about a year, and I'm still building my research group. I am advising students, and I'm developing courses, and I'm actually excited about that. Although it's been difficult and challenging to plan, teaching students, not knowing whether we're going to be in the classroom, but anyway, just putting together these things, and I think I'm really motivated, in being able to support my students, having been there in their shoes, and I mean not too long ago, but also just like in the scholarship that I'm going to do, and the things I'm going to cover in my classes. I just think like these are things that I would have liked to have learned about, and that would have really like spoken to me, and just been really motivating and interesting for me. So it's really it's really exciting for me, and it's going to be a learning process, but that's what I'm looking forward to.
I think Grace and I kind of share that motivation, drawing from our students. I think for me, kind of at the beginning of each semester, you kind of just wait to see who you're going to get in your classroom, and those first few weeks, you kind of start getting the feel for, who's going to really be into what you're doing, and those who aren't. It feels like then you kind of become motivated to get them interested more because they're, shying away, or they're not, you're not reaching them. So you kind of feel like this, I don't know, at least for me, it's like this need to try to rein them back in and say, hey, this is why this is exciting, or this is how it relates to your life. We do, I got the advantage of being at a tribal college, and we're here on the reservation, so we get to draw a lot from like what's happening in our community. How does that fit into what we're learning about environmental science, and try to get them to feel those personal connections. The other place that, because of the pandemic, we haven't been able to do as much is a lot of the outreach programs that we have with the college, and also in my, I don't want to say spare time, but like the other groups that I interact with, we get to do a lot of outreach, and I love seeing, especially the little kids, when we get to bring them to campus and do, even the simple science experiments with them, just to get them interested. Keeps me motivated because they kind of give me that energy. You feed off of that energy from them, and you see, little sparks lighten up here and there when they start making connections with what they see, and why it does what it does. And so that's something I really miss. And the other thing that we didn't get to do this last year because of COVID is our culture camp, which is not just a culture camp, but it's a culture camp with that's STEM based. So we get to come up with projects and speakers and people to come in, and it's geared towards middle school and high school students. So it's our opportunity to sort of give them this insight to what's possible, and the hope is that then they'll go into STEM, or that they'll want to, that STEM won't be so scary to them anymore, that they'll, want to participate, or they'll, what makes it really great is then they see you in the community, and then they go, oh, hey, they recognize you as, yeah, we're the nerds that keep on bringing up science stuff to them, but they like that. So they'll see you at a powwow, and they'll be like, hey, Miss Finley, how are you doing? And when's the next time we're going to do, whatever event that we're going to do, or, when can we come over to the college again? And so those kinds of activities really kind of, at least for me, that's what gets my motivation, because it just reminds me of like why I'm doing this work. Like, the whole, kind of giving back, like AISES gave me so much. And so I've always kind of felt like the least I can do is to keep on pushing the mission of AISES and like trying to bring more Indigenous students into the STEM fields, even if that's not where they stay, even if they don't decide to get a degree in STEM, like at least they gave it a chance, at least they're, you know, interacting with scientists, at least they're broadening their horizons to something other than just, you know, staying home on the res and maybe not doing anything else. So.
Great, thank you. And Amber, could you maybe give us a little bit of perspective on the unique position that tribal colleges are in to help further Natives and Indigenous people in STEM, and maybe any work that you or your students or other people that you work with are doing in that area?
So I think for tribal colleges, at one time it used to be that most of our tribal colleges were doing either certificate programs or technical degrees, things that people could hurry up and get right into the workforce. Because that was one of the main reasons why we started kind of doing tribal colleges, was to try to increase opportunities for our Native people to get an education at home and then be able to go out and work and earn a living, right? And we've seen the evolution of tribal colleges from these just 2-year degrees or technical degrees to now full-on universities, right? We have several tribal colleges that offer 4-year degrees, including my college that offers we offer 3 4-year degree programs, and then there's some tribal colleges that actually offer master's programs now, and so it's definitely changed. And so that gives people the opportunity to stay home, because that's one of the things that I think Christina had mentioned at the beginning, was like that draw of wanting to feel safe in your home community. And so now there's these opportunities to stay home and get your education. And if you choose to, you can go ahead and move on into a bigger university and either get a 4-year or a master's or a PhD. Eventually, someday, I think tribal colleges, that's where we're moving, is wanting to be able to have students be able to complete their whole educational program at home if that's what they want to do. And so what we're seeing is as we're graduating more Natives in these different degree fields, right, they're moving on to get higher degrees now. And so we're starting to see much more PhDs being able to come back home and teach at the universities. And a lot of times what we're seeing is they don't come and become full-time faculty. They come and they participate as part-time faculty or even adjunct faculty. And so they keep their day job, as you will, and they get to participate and help give back and offer courses that we might not be able to offer if we didn't have them at home. At my college, we have the 4-year in environmental science. We also have a 4-year in elementary education. So training more teachers to get back into elementary schools, so then we can see faces that look like us, teaching the kinds of stuff that we know, and incorporating our culture back into the education system as well, which I think is extremely important. And then we also have, like at our college, what we see is oftentimes there's this hybrid where the tribal college will work with a bigger university to offer a 4-year bachelor's program. So the student will go and start their first 2 years at the tribal college, and then they'll transition to going to another university. And that's all fine and well, because it worked really well to get us to the place where we actually have bachelor's and master's degree students. But now that they're graduating, now we're trying to create those programs on our campuses. And one successful case right now is that our pre-engineering program, which was tied to North Dakota State University, is now going to be able to be a standalone program. So we actually have enough engineers working at our college to be able to offer what will become a 4-year engineering program, likely civil engineering. So we don't have like the full spectrum, but we have something that wasn't offered before. And I think a lot of tribal colleges are doing that, where we're trying to bring those degree opportunities to our students so that they don't feel like they have to leave, or they don't feel, because once they leave, the other problem that we face is that they sometimes don't come back. They end up getting picked up, which AISES is awesome because it offers all these opportunities, right, to leave and go out and work for all these great companies. But then that means we lose them from our tribal communities. And our tribal communities really need engineers and biologists and lawyers and people who fill in these professional positions. And a lot of times we lose them to these larger companies and the appeal of, living off the reservation, which is understandable. I mean, there's the pros and cons of living on the reservation, but at the same time, there's people who really do want to return, and we want to offer them those opportunities to be able to return and to be able to stay there and be able to work in their community and and keep that legacy going now that we've starting to establish it.
That's great. Thank you. And so I'm curious, and this is a question for all of you. What role does traditional knowledge play in obtaining STEM degrees or obtaining higher education, whether that's your undergrad or master's, PhD, whatever level people are hoping to go to in their careers? What role has traditional knowledge played for you, or do you see it playing in the future of Natives pursuing STEM degrees?
Okay, I'm only going to talk because I brought it up in my last answer here, but um, for me, I feel like traditional knowledge does have a place in STEM, um, and we're getting a lot better at making those connections um, as faculty, but then also students are making those connections themselves and wanting to do research in areas that involve traditional knowledge. And I want to see that continue to happen because it's been a real struggle to bring that to STEM in a way that it's accepted as a knowledge system itself. And so, like, for my personal self, I never really even heard of this term like traditional knowledge or traditional ecological knowledge until I joined the Ecological Society of America, and they have their own section of people who study traditional ecological knowledge or traditional knowledge. And I feel like it it's cool that they have a section, but at the same time, like, I'd like to see more of the ecologists understanding how traditional knowledge, not because Indigenous people aren't just to North America, there's Indigenous people all over the world, and they bring those knowledge systems that have been sitting there for millennia. Um, it's there, and they should acknowledge it. They should be able to accept it, that just because it's not explained the same way that Western science is explained doesn't mean that it's any less valid or that it doesn't have a place. Um, the other part of this is when we start talking about how does traditional knowledge play into our us as STEM professionals. I seen a question on the comments about, like, how do you do self-care, or how do you center yourself? And for me, I'm getting very um, when I'm getting sort of um, bogged down and don't know what to do and super frustrated, I turn to my traditional knowledge to be able to cope with those things, right? So I'll smudge myself off, or I'll, sometimes I go to sweat. I haven't been in a while, but sweat offers a really good opportunity to sort of find that clarity again, to cleanse yourself, and to be able to um recenter when things are not going so well. I turn to prayer, which is something that I think as a STEM person we don't hear very much about, how our faith interacts with who we are as individuals. And I think our you know our faith systems are very much intertwined with who we are and what we do as STEM professionals. I mean, um, when I choose to do a research project, I often look for research projects that involve some type of traditional knowledge or incorporating traditional knowledge in some way. And so those are things that I feel like um, are ways that traditional knowledge is sort of seated in who we are. So just because we're Indigenous people, we bring that with us, and it's not something that we necessarily separate, being in the STEM field or being a STEM major. And Um, I I really liked Christina's story about how she got into or got interested in kind of aerospace, and I'll let her go ahead and tell it. But I mean, she has a story about how her grandfather doing storytelling sort of inspired her to do the to go into that particular field. And um, I think we often forget those connections because academia sort of wants to compartmentalize all of this stuff, and we try to remove the human part of us from science, and science is not like that. Science, our personal experiences directly reflect what kind of science that we do, and I think that's important, and it's a value that you should never let go of, um, no matter how much people try to sort of drill it out of you, doing research or doing more technical degrees. But that's I don't want to keep talking forever, so I'll let somebody else go.
So I can add, in completing my own research, wanting to complete an engineering degree, it was really hard to even kind of like set up a research question and centered in a tribal community. So adding anything else was just going to be impossible and take forever. So for strategic reasons, I think that's really difficult for a lot of students, and um, I mean, it may not be the most appropriate. So in working with students, I'm always really accommodating to what they want to do. Being one of the few Native American professors, the only one in my department, I get a lot of students routed to me, just really, even by my colleagues, just asking anything about Indigenous people, whether I have knowledge about that or not. So I try to be as diplomatic as possible, and say, here are some resources, and some of them are about traditional knowledge, and you know, I I I really have to be cognizant that they may not um, find the best resources, but also, like, I'm not an expert in the area. I'm not an expert in whatever scientific question they were asking. So um, that's always challenging in being an Indigenous scientist, especially at a university where we're so underrepresented. Um, but in directing my own research in the next phase, I really want to try to encourage that, and specifically when thinking about equity. I brought this up before, so something I want to approach in in capacity building, and looking at things like food sovereignty. What were the role of women, and that goes hand in hand with a lot of the principles of women being experts, being scientists in plants and botany, and without having to spell everything out. I think that would speak to a lot of people doing research and are already work with students now doing research in that area. So just to be inclusive, but also realizing the limitations and when that's appropriate, and depending on what community you're working with, the appropriateness as well.
And I'll just go ahead and like share my story really quick that Amber had mentioned about the importance of kind of traditional knowledge and how traditional knowledge, or in my case, storytelling, can also help you motivate or even want to inspire you to go on a path that you want to. So even before I saw my first airplane, my grandpa always told me all these different stories, and I'm pretty sure I'm not sure if you guys are familiar, but in the Navajo culture, the coyote is kind of the trickster, and there's a lot of our storytelling always has to do coyote in it. But to kind of give you a really quick overview of the story he told me was a story of how the stars of the sky were placed, how the stars were placed in the galaxy and the sky when you look up at night. And so the holy people were placing strategically the stars in the sky, and that's how you see like the Big Dipper and all these like different, you know, shapes and shapes at night if you look up into the stars. And they had all these stars on like a blanket. And the coyote wanted to help, and of course the holy ones were like, no, we're strategically doing this, you know, don't bother us, leave us alone. Of course, when, you know, the holy people were kind of off on their side, kind of discussing what their next ones are going to place and where it's going to be placed, the coyote kind of grabbed the blanket and just kind of threw it up into the skies. And that's why there's only very few placed, you know, like the Big Dipper and all these like different little strategic animals you see in the sky. That's why there's not that many. There's only a little bit, but that's why all the stars are all kind of scattered everywhere. But I was just always fascinated with the stars, even at a young age. And I know my grandfather always shared that story, and just how, you know, that also kind of got my mind running about the stars and space and what's going up in there, and seeing the satellites fly over you. And when you grow up in a very rural areas like we all did, you know, I didn't have electricity growing up, so you could see really bright things flying in the sky. So I was, even since then, I became really obsessed. But that's just an example of how traditional knowledge, or, you know, passing on stories from your culture, can also really motivate you and inspire you to go on the path you didn't think you wanted to. But and for me, in my case, I was always obsessed with space and flight, and that's how I, you know, studied aerospace. So
Thank you all. And our time is coming to an end. And I think that this is a great question for us to end on, and asking basically some advice specifically for his nieces to keep them motivated to work hard in school and keep going strong as they get older in their teenage years. And advice in general that you have to offer. You've given us a lot of advice this evening, but any other advice that you want to leave us with?
Well, I have a niece that is around that age, and I I know she well, it's just a difficult year, but uh, you know, she also needs that motivation. But you know, I would say, you know, definitely, especially when they go into high school, you know, there's always AISES and the different there's a lot of different STEM organizations that do outreach to young students, to high school students. Uh, I think depending in the area you are, there's usually some type of outreach, particularly at public universities. Like I remember participating in like Expanding Your Horizons, and they had a program like that at Cornell, which is a public university. So there definitely are activities, but it's helpful to see, you know, to see role models, and to really, I mean, I think just having that support from your family, I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and being one of the few people to go to college, to go to graduate school, I know that that they need a lot of guidance, and I try as much as I can without being too preachy. There's a fine line, but just having that exposure to role models, and really just being supporting of their activities. If they excel in sports, that really goes a long way in encouragement to remain active in extracurricular activities, and hopefully motivated to go on to complete high school and then go on to college. So that would be my advice.
My other advice would be to also, we're here because of AISES, and McKaylee, Amber, and I, Grace, and we've all taken part of the AISES, what they have to offer. So what better time to even get them involved, maybe even the science fairs. Maybe you as an uncle, you can get them excited about a topic, or maybe talk about, hey, how do you guys feel about entering the science fair? It's has been virtual for the past couple of years, and so I'm with the pandemic and everything, I assume it will also continue to be virtual for 2021. But that might be an idea to maybe get them excited about something, and then. But as Grace has also said too, it's just as family, it's kind of it's kind of hard because you don't want to be on them all the time, like, you got to do this, you should do this, but just kind of lightly want to motivate them, like, hey, how do you guys feel about this? Or but also find what they're kind of interested in at the time. It'll always change, it can change, and most likely will change your interests and everything like that. But if if they're interested in the sciences, or engineering or technology, I think it would be pretty cool to have them enter the science fair, or even just get them thinking about it, as we've got some time here for between now and science fair in 2021.
So my answer might be a little orthodox, but I'd say just force them. I ended up raising 5 of my nieces and nephews, and the older 2 were already getting ready to be in middle school when they came to live with me, and the other younger 3 were in elementary school. And the work I was doing just always had me doing some type of outreach or activities, and they're STEM, and so lo and behold, they all got to come with me all the time, and they were all forced to participate, sometimes whether they wanted to or not. And I never expected them to want to go into a science field, or to, suddenly want to be an engineer because they participated. But one of the nice things that came out of that, forcing them to come with me to all these things, was that they ended up actually kind of feeling really proud when they knew information that other people their age didn't know. And so if we would be at an event and they knew the answer to a question because they had participated in one of our science programs, they would feel, I could see that they felt this sense of pride, and they would answer the question, and everybody would be like, oh, you know that. And I think for them that just sort of sparked little bits of confidence. And so you don't have to force your kids, but start taking them to things like that. There's a lot of virtual stuff that's going on now because of the pandemic, and there's a lot of kits that are out there that you can do at home. Like, you can buy stuff, and then there's everyday science that people just sort of forget about. Like, cooking itself is a science, and people can draw from that however much they want. So you don't have to be in your face hardcore science. You can do things that are just everyday things that make it's more fun and relatable. And I think, especially for that age group and for females, it's important for them to find those things that they can find science in, because there's a lot of pressure at that age to sort of kind of go with the flow and try to fit in and try to not sort of stick out as a nerd, or to not stick out as somebody who's like wants to be an overachiever. And we need to just sort of encourage them to go ahead and feel comfortable doing whatever level of science that they want to do. And we're not going to get everybody, but at least we're introducing them to those concepts, and we're bringing opportunities for them that maybe they wouldn't have gotten if, you know, they didn't have an uncle or an aunt to sort of support them in that way. Because, you know, a lot of kids grow up, especially on the res, they don't have any exposure to any of that. Unfortunately, a lot of the times they're left home alone because their parents are both working and they don't have opportunities, and that's where we really fill in those types of things. So I would just say, don't force them, but like bring them along, or show them, take them to work with you, or make them see what kinds of stuff that you're doing that makes it, accessible to them. And they may or may not like it, but at least you're, kind of doing your part.
Wonderful. I want to thank our audience for tuning in with us and being here with us this evening. And I want to offer another huge thank you to our panelists for taking some time out of your day and for being here with us and sharing your wisdom. So grateful to have been a part of this. I also want to mention that this recording will be available on the AISES YouTube channel after this, and will remain on Facebook. So feel free to watch if you couldn't tune in at this time. It will be available to you. And thank you again, everyone, for being with us this evening.